Sophia always knew she wanted to be a doctor. Since childhood, something inside her had driven her to help people. While other children played with dolls, she simulated surgeries on her toys, convinced that one day she would be able to save lives for real. Her mother, however, never understood this fascination. For her, medicine was a cold, impersonal, and dark path, a destiny too harsh for the delicate daughter she had raised with so much love. Sophia was a girl with soft gestures, curly blonde hair that cascaded down her shoulders, and an almost always serene expression. She could have followed a calmer, more feminine career, her mother thought. After all, there was no shortage of options. She could have been a brilliant neurologist, an elegant ophthalmologist, or even a respected therapist. But no, Sophia wanted the operating room, the scalpel in her hand, and the weight of a patient's life on her shoulders. From an early age, Sophia developed a sense of responsibility that few people her age demonstrated. While many teenagers struggled with the weight of common choices, such as which college to choose or which friends to keep, Sophia faced deeper moral dilemmas. How to balance her personal life with such a demanding career. She knew that the path she had chosen would be lonely, but she was willing to pay the price. "It's a calling," she would tell herself, repeating those words whenever discouragement tried to invade her heart. Her mother, on the other hand, saw this almost obsessive dedication in a different light. To her, Sophia was drifting away from what really mattered in life: love, family, emotional stability. Their relationship was a constant dance of support and frustration. Sophia, on the one hand, admired the strength of her mother, a woman who had raised a family largely on her own, without the help of a husband. She saw her mother's determination as a reflection of her own strength. But at the same time, she felt the weight of unmet expectations. "Honey, life is not all work," her mother would say. "If you keep going like this, you'll end up alone." This kind of conversation would happen whenever Sophia declined invitations to meet or skipped family events because of the hospital. The young surgeon would respond with a restrained smile. "I know, Mom, but I have time." Marriage is not a race. But deep down she knew that these words did not reassure her mother. The fear that Sophia was wasting her youth was palpable in every gesture, in every worried look. Working at the hospital was not easy. It was a tough routine marked by endless shifts and a responsibility that few could handle. Sophia, despite her fragile appearance, had nerves of steel. The hospital had become a second home for her, where she spent more hours than in her own apartment. She lived for the moments leading up to surgery, the careful preparation, the sound of the machines, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. It was in those moments that she felt truly alive. There was an almost silent satisfaction in knowing that, with her hands, she could change a person's destiny. Perhaps that was why she accepted more and more responsibilities, without complaining about the weekends she sacrificed or the holidays spent in the cold corridors of the hospital. But at the same time, Sophia felt the weight of her isolation. Ever since she had been betrayed by an old boyfriend in college, something inside her had changed. He had chosen her best friend, and the emotional impact of that betrayal had driven her away from everything and everyone. After that, Sophia began to avoid intimate relationships, preferring to immerse herself in work to numb the pain. There was an irony in that. A doctor, an expert in repairing the human body, but incapable of dealing with her own emotional wounds. Her friends at the time soon noticed that she was distancing herself, preferring the silence of the operating room to the company of people who could hurt her again. Still, she was beautiful. There was no denying it. Her blonde hair contrasted with her pale skin, and her brown eyes, although usually tired, still held a special sparkle, as if a part of her knew that deep down, she was not destined to be alone forever. But this beauty seemed irrelevant to Sophia, who saw her body as a tool of her trade, an extension of her profession. Life outside the hospital was almost non-existent. She rarely went out, and when she did, it was for activities that did not remind her of the constant pressure of saving lives. Solitary walks in the park or a quiet afternoon reading a book became her only forms of relaxation. She was well aware that her work was taking its toll, but her passion for medicine was too strong to allow her to consider quitting. Even when her body showed signs of fatigue, Sophia's mind remained alert. Each new case was an opportunity to prove herself, to show that, despite her youth, she was one of the best surgeons in the city. This recognition, however, did not come without its challenges. Her superiors watched her critically, waiting for any slip-up to remind her that she was still a rookie. But Sophia never gave them a reason. Each surgery she performed was a chance to reaffirm her competence, to show that she had chosen the right path, even if her mother still insisted that being a doctor is a lonely life. For Sophia, however, loneliness was the price she had to pay for a career that made her feel alive. Even if, deep down, she had moments of doubt about what she was really sacrificing. This methodical, disciplined life, governed by the hospital schedule, shaped who Sophia had become. Society's expectations and her mother's pressures became nothing more than distant noises. She was committed to her calling, to the oath she had made to save lives, regardless of the personal sacrifices. Each morning was a new battle, and she took pride in fighting those battles alone. That freezing night, Sophia was exhausted. The day at the hospital had been grueling, marked by 2 challenging surgeries and a third, unexpected one that had kept her in the operating room for hours. When it was finally over, the patient's body was out of danger, but Sophia's exhaustion was palpable. She walked quickly through the park that surrounded the hospital, thinking only of the relief that awaited her. Getting to her apartment, taking off her boots, diving into the hot tub, and letting the water ease the weight of hours spent standing. As her thoughts drifted into these small rewards, a strange sound made her stop. A deep, almost muffled groan seemed to echo through the trees. Sophia froze for a moment, feeling the cold of the night creeping up on her skin. She looked around, trying to locate the source of the sound. It was dark, and the shadows of the trees cast ghostly figures across the path. The groan repeated itself, louder this time. She hesitated, her initial instinct being to move on and ignore what she had heard. Maybe it was just an animal or someone drunk, she thought, trying to keep her curiosity at bay. But something compelled her to investigate. With a sigh, she pulled her cell phone out of her pocket, turned on the flashlight, and headed in the direction of the noise. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing a man huddled in the bushes. He was lying down, writhing in pain. His clothes were filthy rags, his disheveled hair fell over his aged, dirty face, and his long, unkempt beard added to the impression of abandonment. Sophia felt her stomach churn, not because of the man's condition, but because of the sadness of the situation. He was, without a doubt, a homeless person. The strong smell of alcohol and dirt hung in the air, confirming what her eyes had already seen. Someone society had forgotten. She approached cautiously, still undecided about what to do. It wouldn't be the first time she had encountered people in homeless situations, and her instinct for self-preservation made her ponder. Maybe he was just drunk, maybe he was dangerous. But her mind, trained to save lives, pulled her in another direction. He's in pain, she thought, her clinical gaze identifying the problem even before any examination. He needs help. Sir? She called in a soft but firm voice, trying not to scare him. Are you okay? The man only groaned in response, bending over and holding his abdomen. Without thinking twice, Sophia knelt beside him, gently touching his arm to get his attention. I'm a doctor. I'm going to help you, okay? The professional touch and the comforting voice seemed to calm the man for a brief moment. Sophia pressed his abdomen lightly, feeling the stiffness under the skin. A suspicion of appendicitis or something similar arose in her mind. Without hesitation, she picked up the phone and called the hospital's emergency room. The receptionist's response was almost automatic. A homeless person? The voice on the other end of the line sounded surprised. Our hospital is not the kind of place that accepts that type of patient, doctor. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, trying to contain her frustration. He needs urgent surgery. If we don't get an ambulance now, he could die before he gets to another hospital, she said firmly. The receptionist hesitated for a moment, but gave in to the command in Sophia's voice. The ambulance was sent and Sophia remained by the man's side until the paramedics arrived. When they arrived, the judgmental looks were instantaneous. One of the paramedics, seeing the man's deplorable condition, asked skeptically, "Are you sure we're going to take him to the hospital, doctor? This is a high-class hospital. And he's a human being," Sophia replied, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Carefully carry him and place him on the stretcher." The paramedics reluctantly followed Sophia's orders. At the hospital, the scene repeated itself. Nurses hesitated when they saw the man. The doctor on duty, Derek, looked at Sophia with contempt and refused to perform the surgery. "I'm not going near that homeless guy," he said dryly. "I'll do it myself then," Sophia replied without blinking. She couldn't turn her back on that man, not after seeing his pain, after feeling the gravity of his condition. Sophia knew she was crossing a dangerous line, but for her, the only line that mattered was the one that separated life from death. The surgery was a success. Sophia fought against fatigue, physical and mental exhaustion, and still managed to save the life of that unknown man. She didn't expect applause or recognition. In fact, she hardly thought of what she had done as an act of heroism. For her, it was simply what any doctor should do: save lives, regardless of who was on the stretcher. When the operation was over and the man was taken to recovery, Sophia finally felt the weight of the day dragging down on her shoulders. The hospital was silent, the late evening hours having already emptied the hallways. She retreated to the locker room, changed from her surgical scrubs to her casual clothes, and walked slowly home, thinking that she could finally rest. But the true impact of her actions was yet to come. The next morning, Sophia was called to the office of the hospital's chief, the feared Mr. Edvaldo. He was a man known for his coldness and his relentless focus on maintaining the institution's impeccable reputation. To him, the hospital was more than just a health facility. It was a business, a prestigious brand that needed to be protected at all costs. As she entered the room with its cold walls and impersonal decor, Sophia immediately realized that the conversation would not be pleasant. The expression on Mr. Edvaldo's face already indicated trouble. "Dr. Sophia," he began, without even looking up from the papers in front of him, "we received several complaints about your conduct last night." She was confused for a moment, trying to understand what he was talking about. "Complaints?" she asked, still maintaining her firm posture. "Yes, complaints." He finally looked up, his eyes sharp as blades. "It seems that you took the liberty of bringing a beggar to our hospital, a prestigious hospital, which serves a specific clientele, and now you have compromised our reputation." Sophia felt the blood rush to her head. How could he turn something so noble, the act of saving a life, into a matter of image and status? She took a deep breath before answering. "I did what any doctor would do. He was seriously ill. If he hadn't had surgery, he would have died. That's not our problem." Mr. Edvaldo leaned forward, his voice gaining a higher and harsher tone. "We are not a public hospital. We have a reputation to maintain, and what you did was reckless and irresponsible. You didn't think about the consequences for the hospital. People pay a lot to be treated here. This man, this beggar, has no place here." His words hit Sophia like punches. She knew that the hospital operated under market rules, but she never expected such an inhumane reaction. Still, she tried to argue. "He's a person, Mr. Edvaldo. A human being. I saved him, and I would do it again. It doesn't matter if he's rich or poor, he needed help." "That doesn't matter anymore," Edvaldo cut in, his voice as cold as ice. "You're fired." For a moment, the world around Sophia seemed to stop. Fired? For saving a life? The injustice of that decision left her paralyzed, unable to find the right words to respond. She tried to digest what was happening while Mr. Edvaldo continued, impassive. "Not only are you fired, doctor, but you're also being held responsible for the losses the hospital suffered. Your salary and rights will be withheld. You violated our rules and now you're going to pay for it." Sophia felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She was fired, yes, but without any labor rights. Everything she had achieved, the sweat and endless hours she had dedicated to the hospital, now seemed irrelevant. Edvaldo's cold gaze showed no compassion or doubt. To him, Sophia was now a problem to be eliminated. She left the office in silence, her hands shaking and her heart heavy. As she walked through the corridors she had so often walked with pride, she now felt like a stranger in this place. The nurses, who had hesitated to touch the patient the night before, looked at her with pity, but no one dared to say anything. Derek, the doctor who had refused to help with the surgery, did not even look up when she passed. Sophia returned home a shadow of her former self that morning. When her mother saw her come through the door, she immediately realized something was wrong. "Honey, what happened?" she asked, her eyes full of concern. Sophia could barely answer. "I was fired, Mom," she said, her voice weak and barely audible. "But why?" Her mother came closer, trying to understand what had happened. With her face marked by silent tears, Sophia told her everything. The operation, her colleagues' reactions, the conversation with Mr. Edvaldo. Her mother, upon hearing this, shook her head in disbelief. "That's terrible, my love. They're blinded by money. You did the right thing. If you had let that man die, that would have been a mistake." Despite her words of support, Sophia felt an enormous void. She knew her mother was right, but at the same time, she couldn't help but feel defeated. Everything she had built seemed to have crumbled in one night. What now? How could she move on, knowing that the decision to save a life had left her without a job and without any prospects for the future? As Sophia tried to process the devastating reality of her dismissal, something unexpected was happening at the hospital. The man she had saved the night before, the same homeless man who had been nearly ignored, was about to bring about a dramatic turn of events for everyone involved. A routine inspection by the Ministry of Health was scheduled to take place that day, and as usual, the hospital was preparing to ensure that everything was spotless in the eyes of the inspectors. When the inspectors arrived, there was no indication that today would be any different. Nathaniel, one of the lead inspectors and the son of a wealthy businessman in the medical equipment industry, was on the team. He wasn't particularly worried about the inspection. Everything seemed to be going as expected, until something caught his attention. As he walked down the emergency room hallway, he saw a patient being wheeled out on a stretcher. The man, visibly frail, was covered in blankets, his face partially hidden by his long, unkempt beard. But something about that face, even under layers of neglect and suffering, made him stop dead in his tracks. His heart raced. No, it can't be, he thought in disbelief. He quickly approached the stretcher, pushing aside the nurses who were carrying the man. Nathaniel looked more closely, his gaze fixed on the patient's worn features, and in a moment of absolute surprise, his voice echoed through the corridors. "Father?" The nurses stopped, perplexed, exchanging confused glances. The man on the stretcher, who until then had shown no sign of recognition of where he was, slowly turned his head, his tired, cloudy eyes meeting Nathaniel's. There was a brief moment of silence, as if time had stopped around them. The inspector, breathing heavily, reached out his hand to the man's face. "Father, it's me. Do you recognize me?" His voice was full of emotion, as if each word carried years of search and desperation contained within. The homeless man, now identified as Mr. Fabio, blinked a few times as if struggling to focus his fragmented memories. He looked at his son with confusion in his eyes, unable to process what was happening. It was clear that something had happened to him in the last few years, something that had robbed him of his identity and dignity. Nathaniel was shocked. His father, a respected businessman, had been missing for over 2 years. After he disappeared, his family and friends believed he had died, especially after his car was found adrift in a river, with no sign of his body. The police had called off the search after months of investigation, concluding that Mr. Fabio had probably been the victim of a fatal accident. But Nathaniel never accepted that. He kept hoping that his father was still alive. even though each day that passed was a cruel reminder that reality could be different. Now, after so much time, here he was, alive, but in a situation that Nathanael could never have imagined. How did this happen? Nathanael could barely speak, his mind spinning in 1,000 directions. He was trying to put together the pieces of an impossible puzzle. What was his father doing there? How had he survived? And why did no one at the hospital seem to care about the state he was in? Nathanael turned to the nurses, anger and confusion in his eyes. How did they leave him in this state? He asked, his voice full of indignation. Why isn't he getting the best possible treatment? The nurses, not knowing how to respond, exchanged nervous glances. It was then that Nathanael began to understand the depth of the situation. He learned, through quick conversations with the staff, that his father had been treated like a homeless person, a common beggar. But something else caught his attention. As he overheard the nurses quietly talking about the doctor who had saved his father, Nathanael knew that the person responsible for his father's life was no longer at the hospital. Sophia. The name echoed like a revelation. She was the one who had defied all protocol, who had ignored his father's social status, and risked losing everything to save his life. Nathanael quickly discovered what had happened. The nurses recounted how Sophia had fought against the indifference and cruelty of the hospital system to ensure that her father had a chance. However, this courageous decision had cost her her job. Mr. Edvaldo, in his tireless quest to keep the hospital's image intact, did not think twice before firing Sophia for her mistake. Nathanael's anger only grew as he understood the full picture. The doctor who had saved his father had been punished, while those who were supposed to protect human life acted only out of self-interest. He knew he could not let it go on like this. More than just saving her father, Sophia had demonstrated a character and courage he rarely saw in a hospital setting. He needed to right this injustice, not just out of gratitude, but because it was the right thing to do. Determined to act, Nathanael went straight to Mr. Edvaldo's office without even making an appointment. When he entered, his expression was one of calculated coldness, a mask of determination that hid the deep revolt he felt inside. Mr. Edvaldo, upon seeing him, immediately gave him a nervous smile, clearly trying to please him. "Ah, Mr. Nathanael, it's a pleasure to see you. Your father is receiving the best possible care now, I can assure you." Nathanael didn't let him finish. "This isn't about my father." His voice was firm, controlled, but each word carried the weight of pent-up anger. "It's about the doctor who saved his life, Sophia. You fired her for doing what you and the hospital should have done." The smile on Mr. Edvaldo's face instantly disappeared. He knew he couldn't argue with what was coming. Nathanael, determined, wouldn't leave without Sophia's redemption. Nathanael, still outraged by Sophia's dismissal, knew he had to act quickly to right the wrong that had occurred. After confronting Mr. Edvaldo in his office, he made it clear that he would not accept any excuses or ploys to cover up the mistake. Nathanael's firm gaze left no room for negotiation. "You're going to fix this now," he said, his voice undebatable. Mr. Edvaldo, taken aback by the intensity of the situation, tried to justify himself, arguing that Sophia had violated hospital protocols by operating on someone without insurance and, more importantly, without a social status that matched the hospital's standard. He tried to adopt a diplomatic tone as if his decision had been a matter of business and not an act of indifference. But Nathanael was not about to hear any more empty excuses. He knew that Sophia had done the right thing by saving her father's life, and the fact that she had been punished for it was intolerable. "Go to her apartment and bring Sophia back to the hospital," Nathanael said, his tone stern. "And make sure she knows that her dismissal was a mistake. I will not allow this hospital to continue with this kind of inhumane practice." Mr. Edvaldo, seeing that there was no way out, reluctantly agreed. "Yes, sir, I will take care of this immediately," he replied, trying to hide his nervousness. Then he hurried out of the office, knowing that any hesitation would only make his situation worse. While Mr. Edvaldo headed to Sophia's apartment, she was at home, still processing the shock of her dismissal. Her mind was racing over the events of the past few days. She felt defeated, not so much because she had lost her job, but because of the injustice of having been punished for doing the right thing. She knew that the hospital system was often cruel, and that business rules often spoke louder than ethics, but none of that softened the blow. Medicine was all she knew, it was her reason for living, and now it all seemed to have been arbitrarily and cruelly ripped from her hands. While she was lost in these thoughts, a knock on the door surprised her. Sophia hesitated before answering, and when she opened the door, she was surprised to see Mr. Edvaldo standing there, an expression of obvious embarrassment on his face. He looked out of place, as if this act was completely against his nature. "Dr. Sophia," he began, choosing his words carefully. "I made a mistake, a big mistake. Your dismissal was a rash decision. I apologize." Sophia, in disbelief, was silent for a moment, trying to process the scene before her. The man who had ordered her dismissal was now standing at her door. Apologizing? It didn't seem real. "I would like you to return to the hospital," he continued, uncomfortable with the situation. "Mr. Nathaniel, the son of the man you operated on, he found out about what happened and demanded that your dismissal be reversed. He knows that you saved his father's life and believes that you shouldn't be punished for it." Sophia felt a mix of emotions. Part of her was surprised, almost shocked, by the sudden change of events. Another part was deeply relieved to know that someone finally recognized her effort and her correct decision to help that man. But there was also a part of distrust after all. Mr. Edvaldo didn't seem like the kind of person who changed his mind so easily. She knew that this change of heart hadn't come about because of his own merit, but because of pressure from Nathaniel. She looked at Mr. Edvaldo with a serious expression, trying to keep control over her emotions. "I only did what any doctor should do. Save a life. She shouldn't have been fired for that in the first place." "You're right," Mr. Edvaldo replied, shaking his head. "But now I'm trying to make amends. I ask that you return to the hospital." Sophia hesitated for a moment. Returning to the hospital where she had been so unfairly treated would not be an easy decision. Pride and betrayal were still present, but she knew that her love for medicine spoke louder. Helping people was what drove her, what gave her life meaning, and if the opportunity to continue doing that was being offered again, she couldn't let pride stop her from accepting it. "I'll come back," she said finally, "but only because my patients need me, not because of your excuses." Mr. Edvaldo, visibly relieved, nodded. "Very well, doctor. I appreciate your understanding." A short time later, Sophia was back at the hospital. When she arrived, she found Nathaniel waiting for her at the entrance. He smiled at her, and Sophia, for a moment, felt a wave of gratitude. Nathaniel was not only the son of the man she had saved, but also the one responsible for ensuring that the injustice she had suffered was righted. They exchanged glances, and without words, there was a mutual understanding between them. Nathaniel knew how hard she had fought to uphold her ethics, and Sophia understood that he had done it not out of obligation, but because he recognized her courage and integrity. "I'm glad you're back," Nathaniel said, breaking the silence. "You deserve to be here, and the hospital needs people like you." Sophia smiled slightly, but she still maintained a certain caution. "I only did what any doctor would do. I won't apologize for saving lives." "And you shouldn't," Nathaniel replied. "That's why we're here. To make sure the right people get the chance to do the right job." With Sophia back at the hospital, things began to return to normal, but with a new perspective. The nurses and doctors who had previously hesitated to help her now looked at her with respect. The man she had saved, Mr. Fabio, was still recovering, and Nathaniel remained by his father's side. Sophia knew that, in a way, her courage that night had changed not only the fate of a man, but also the course of her own life. The relationship between Sophia and Nathaniel, initially marked by gratitude, began to change. Something more was being born there, something that went beyond medicine and professional commitments. Sophia felt a connection with Nathaniel, a mutual understanding that she had not expected to find. Little by little, the line between doctor and patient began to blur, and what emerged was a new possibility, something she had not planned for, but which she was beginning to accept. This new phase of Sophia's life was more than a simple victory over injustice. It was a reaffirmation of who she was and what she was willing to do to follow her principles regardless of the consequences. Sophia's return to the hospital was marked by a wave of relief and respect. The environment, previously cold and impersonal, seemed different to her now. The disapproving looks and whispers that had once surrounded her were replaced by quiet admiration. Her colleagues, who had previously hesitated to support her, now understood the depth of her courage. Even those who had criticized her, like Derek, recognized that she had done what few would dare to do, risk her career to save a life that many considered insignificant. Sophia returned to her routine, but something inside her had changed. She was no longer the same doctor who had followed the rules without question. Now she knew that sometimes the rules had to be challenged in the name of what was right. Nathaniel continued to visit the hospital daily to monitor the recovery of his father, Mr. Fabio. During this time, he and Sophia grew closer and closer. Casual conversations in the hallway began to turn into deeper conversations, filled with meaning and unspoken feelings. They shared a bond that went beyond gratitude. Nathaniel saw in Sophia not only the doctor who had saved his father, but a woman of unshakable character, whose compassion and strength touched him deeply. And Sophia, in turn, found in Nathaniel someone who recognized the value of what she did, someone who saw beyond appearances and understood the essence of her mission as a doctor. Over time, the feelings between them evolved naturally. What began as deep respect and admiration soon blossomed into something more. Nathaniel, despite being a serious and focused businessman, had a sensitive side that Sophia did not expect to find. He surprised her with small gestures and moments of silent support, always present without being invasive. Little by little, Sophia allowed herself to open her heart again, something she hadn't done since the traumatic end of her last relationship in college. Their relationship grew, full of meaning and subtleties, and soon they found themselves meeting outside the hospital, sharing more than just professional stories. Mr. Fabio's recovery was slow but positive. He began to remember fragments of his life, and Nathaniel helped him piece together the puzzle of the past. Over time, the memory of how he had been attacked came back to him, revealing a terrible secret. The attack that had left him missing for years was no accident. Paolo, Fabio's stepson, had orchestrated the incident with the intention of taking control of the family business. Paolo knew that, with Fabio out of the way, he could control the company and the assets, manipulating the situation to his advantage. However, he didn't expect Fabio to survive the attack, much less to return to be reunited with his family. With the crime revealed, Paolo was arrested, and Nathaniel's family could finally begin to recover, both emotionally and in business. Nathaniel was furious, but at his father's insistence, he decided not to seek revenge. Mr. Fabio, in an act of mercy, asked Nathaniel not to let Paolo suffer the harshest consequences of the law, and with that, Paolo was sentenced to a lighter sentence, with the right to parole after serving part of the sentence. Despite everything, the betrayal left a deep scar on the family, and Paolo never had contact with them again. He disappeared from the city, taking with him the mistakes he had made and the remorse that he would carry for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Sophia and Nathaniel's situation continued to evolve. Their professional relationship had become something more, and the time they spent together cemented a bond that could no longer be ignored. After months of living together and supporting each other, they fell in love. The love between Sophia and Nathaniel grew naturally, free from outside pressure, and the two soon began making plans for the future. The age difference between them, which at first seemed like a barrier, dissolved as they realized that what really mattered was the connection they shared. The hospital also underwent changes. With Paolo gone, the Fabio family business was restructured, and Nathaniel assumed full control, ensuring that the business thrived without the corrupt influences that had nearly destroyed everything. He also used his new position to promote changes in the hospital system. Knowing the injustices that Sophia and other professionals faced on a daily basis, Nathaniel committed to fighting for more humane and ethical management, something he and Sophia discussed frequently. Mr. Edvaldo, however, was not so lucky. After his attempt to cover up the scandal involving Mr. Fabio was revealed, he was removed from his position, and later, it was discovered that he had embezzled hospital funds for personal use. He was tried and convicted, losing his medical license and professional credibility. His downfall was swift and final, a reminder that those who put profit above human lives ultimately reap the consequences of their actions. Sophia's life, which had previously been focused exclusively on medicine, now found a new and unexpected balance. She continued to save lives, but now she did so with a lighter heart, knowing that she was no longer alone. After a long day of work, she no longer rushed home to her mother, but to dinner with Nathaniel, who was waiting for her with a calm smile. Soon the two began planning their wedding, and the future looked bright for both of them. Sophia had faced many challenges since choosing medicine as her path, but now she understood that the sacrifices she had made had shaped her into the person and doctor she was. And with Nathaniel, she knew she had found not only love, but also a partner who shared her values and worldview. The outcome of her story was not just about professional redemption, but about the importance of fighting for what is right, regardless of the consequences. Sophia had shown everyone around her, and herself, that courage was not just about facing complicated surgeries, but about defending life in all its forms. And in the process, she found not only the justice she deserved, but also a love she never expected. Sophia's story goes far beyond a simple professional trajectory. It delves into deep and universal themes that touch on the complexities of human life, morality, and the fight for justice in a system often corrupted by selfish interests. The first major theme addressed is compassion. Sophia shows from the beginning that her mission as a doctor is not limited to treating those who can afford her services, but to saving lives regardless of who the patient is. Her decision to operate on a man whom many would consider unworthy of receiving care in an elite hospital reveals that for her, compassion is at the core of her medical practice. This gesture is a reminder that empathy and solidarity cannot be restricted by issues of social class or outward appearances. The homeless man that Sophia saves, seemingly invisible to most, is a powerful metaphor for all those who are marginalized by society. He represents the lives that, although forgotten, still carry value and dignity. Sophia sees this clearly, while others around her, trapped by the rules and prejudices of the system, fail to notice. Another central theme is the role of women in a male-dominated profession. The hospital where Sophia works reflects many of the inequalities present in society. As a surgeon, she holds a position of great responsibility, yet she still faces contempt and resistance from her male colleagues. Derek, the doctor who refuses to operate on the homeless patient, is an example of this. His reluctance is not only a matter of prejudice against the patient, but also reflects the resistance that many men have to accepting women in positions of authority and decision-making. Sophia's courage in challenging this culture of oppression is a recurring theme throughout the narrative. She not only faces discrimination from her colleagues, but also the contempt of the hospital system itself, which places profit and prestige above ethics and morals. Mr. Edvaldo, with his entrepreneurial mindset, is the symbol of a system where health is treated as a commodity, and human dignity is ignored in favor of preserving the reputation of elitist institutions. For him, what matters is maintaining the status of the hospital, and any action that threatens this, such as saving a homeless person, is seen as an affront. By firing Sophia, he reaffirms how inhumane the health system can be, and how it can be motivated by interests that have nothing to do with the well-being of people. However, Sophia's story also leads us to reflect on the corruption and abuse of power within this system. The revelation that Mr. Edvaldo was embezzling hospital funds for his own benefit is just one example of how ambition and greed can corrupt even institutions that are supposed to be working for the greater good. This web of corruption, combined with the attempt to silence those who fight for what is right, illustrates the difficulty of maintaining integrity in an environment where values are constantly compromised. But Sophia's story is not just about the obstacles she faces. It is also a celebration of her inner strength and the resilience she demonstrates at every step of her journey. When she is fired, Sophia could have succumbed to despair, as many would. However, she chooses to remain true to her principles, believing that the value of a human life cannot be measured by money or status. Her return to the hospital, not as a loser, but as a professional who has earned her place through her competence and integrity, is a powerful message about the importance of fighting for what you believe in. Another crucial theme is that of humanity within medicine. The story makes us ask ourselves, what does it mean to be a good doctor? Is it about rigidly following the rules and regulations, or, above all, being human? Sophia shows us that the true essence of medicine is empathy, the ability to see the suffering of others and do everything in your power to alleviate it. She challenges the cold, mechanical concept of medical service and brings to light the notion that being a doctor is about more than just a degree or technical skill. It is about having a compassionate heart. Furthermore, the relationship between Sophia and Nathaniel addresses the personal transformation that occurs when two people with similar values meet. Nathaniel, initially emotionally distant, rediscovers the value of compassion through Sophia's example. He sees in his father a man who has been discarded by society, and it is through this experience that he realizes how limited his worldview was. His decision to help Sophia get her job back is not only an act of gratitude, but an admission that he too needs to change, to learn to value people for who they are, and not for what they have. Finally, the theme of love that arises from mutual respect is another high point of the narrative. The relationship between Sophia and Nathaniel emerges naturally, built on admiration and a deep understanding that they both share a sense of justice and humanity. This love, which develops little by little, is a metaphor for Sophia's rebirth as a person, as someone who, after so long, once again believes that it is possible to live not only for work, but also for finding happiness and personal fulfillment. Ultimately, Sophia's story invites us to reflect on how our actions, no matter how small, can have profound and lasting impacts on the lives of others. Her compassion for a man who no one saw brought not only justice for herself, but also transformed the lives of Nathaniel and his father. More than just a surgeon, Sophia is a symbol of resilience, integrity, and the belief that the value of human life cannot be measured by status or wealth. Sophia's story is a powerful lesson in humanity, ethics, and courage. Throughout her journey, we see how the choices she made, some difficult and contrary to society's expectations, were crucial in defining what truly matters in life: human dignity. In a world where appearances and social status often overshadow people's worth, Sophia stands as a reminder that we should always view others with empathy, regardless of their position in society. This video invites us all to reflect on how we treat the people around us, especially those on the margins. By deciding to help a homeless man who no one else wanted to help, Sophia shows us that true compassion goes beyond following rules or protecting institutional interests. She challenges us to think, how many times have we ignored or judged someone based on their appearance or social status? And how many times have we allowed fear or indifference to prevent us from acting with empathy and solidarity? The story also raises an essential question about the values that guide our society. Too often, we are trapped in a system that values profit more than human life, and the hospital where Sophia works is a clear example of this. Mr. Edvaldo's decision to fire Sophia for not following protocols and tarnishing the institution's image is a reflection of this type of mentality. But Nathaniel's intervention and his journey of transformation after seeing his father treated as less than a human being shows us that there is still hope to change these systems, to reclaim the true essence of what should be the priority of any health institution: saving lives, caring for people. Furthermore, the video makes us think about the pressures that women face in the workplace, especially in male-dominated fields such as medicine. Sophia is constantly challenged by her colleagues who underestimate or disrespect her for being a woman. Her courage in facing these adversities and remaining true to her principles inspires us to fight against any form of discrimination or prejudice. She refuses to accept the limitations imposed on her because of her gender and, in doing so, shows that women can and should occupy leadership and decision-making positions in any field. Another important point is the relationship between Sophia and Nathaniel. The love between them is not born from a sudden passion or superficial attraction, but from mutual respect and deep admiration for the values that they both share. The way that Nathaniel learns from Sophia about compassion, justice, and courage is a reminder that true love is often based on the ability to admire and support the other in their convictions and in what makes them whole. And this relationship teaches us that even when we are deeply immersed in our professions or responsibilities, it is never too late to find someone with whom we can share our lives and build something together. In addition to the social and emotional themes, the video also touches on practical issues that we all face, the choices we make in our careers, and how they impact our personal lives. For Sophia, becoming a surgeon has always been her dream, but throughout the story, she discovers that there is more to life than just work. Balancing career and personal life is a constant struggle for many people, especially those who, like Sophia, are extremely dedicated to what they do. Her journey reminds us of the importance of finding a balance where we can dedicate ourselves to what we love without losing sight of the other essential parts of our lives, such as love, family, and friends. Ultimately, Sophia's story is about the search for justice and recognition. She shows us that sometimes the person who deserves the most recognition is the one who works behind the scenes, without fanfare, but with quiet and relentless dedication. By being rehired and finding new meaning in her life alongside Nathaniel, Sophia symbolizes the victory of integrity over corruption, of altruism over selfishness, and of the true calling of a doctor: to care for, heal, and protect life. In conclusion, this video challenges us to be better, to look beyond appearances and the rules imposed by an often cold and impersonal society. It reminds us of the transformative power of compassion and the importance of fighting for our principles, even when the consequences seem heavy. Sophia teaches us that the value of a life cannot be measured by money, status, or power, and that in the end, what really matters is how we choose to treat each other. We are deeply grateful to everyone who followed this story until the end. We hope that the reflections and emotions awakened by this narrative can inspire changes in your own worlds, whether in small gestures of empathy or in big decisions that can transform lives. Just like Sophia, who faced obstacles in the name of what she believed was right, each of us can make a difference in our daily lives. We also thank all the health professionals who, every day, put the lives of others above all else, often in the midst of challenges that we cannot even imagine. You are true heroes, and stories like Sophia's remind us of the sacrifice and value of what you do. May we all, inspired by this story, continue to fight for a more just, humane, and compassionate world. Thank you very much.